Welcome to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning, a series of podcasts hosted by Ian Hull and Susanna Popvic-Montag. The podcast you are listening to will provide information and insights into estate planning in Canada. From the offices of Hull and Hull in Toronto, here are Ian and Susanna.
Hi, and welcome to Hull and Estates and Succession Planning. You're listening to our episode being published on August 18th, 2009. Hello, this is Ian Hull with Jordan Atin. Our special guest today, Susanna Popvic-Montag, is not able to join us, so we thought we would take the opportunity to bring in a rock star and someone who we do a lot of work with in our firm, and specializes in estates and trusts, certified by the Law Society, but more importantly is more on the solicitor's side. Your practice tends to be more focused on the non-contentious side.
That's right, I leave the fighting to you.
Good. So we'll fight a bit today.
All right.
Because then it won't be a fair fight. All right, so what we thought we'd like to talk about today is an interesting scenario that you raised with me, and one that I hadn't understood was as prevalent as it seems to be. And that is the circumstances when all of us, hopefully from time to time, take the odd vacation, and we are rushing around trying to make sure that's all organized, the plane tickets and the hotel books and so on, excited about getting away, trying to get all our work done, and we sometimes think about what would happen if something happens to us while we're away, and think about our will and the status of our will. So, Jordan, what are some of the things that, first of all, I think that is a scenario that it's sort of one of the things you check off before you leave. Is everything available? I got my credit cards, or does someone know where my will is? Is that one of the scenarios?
Yeah, I have this recurring nightmare where I die intestate as a wills lawyer, and everyone makes fun of me in my profession because, of course, I neglected to let anybody know where my original will was, or to do an original will or whatever. So I get that panic attack. So I have about 12 wills that I've done over the course, because I always forget where the original is, and I quickly print up a new one. But people always ask me, you guys don't have a busy time, do you? And I say, busy time is December and in August, when people are trying to go away and they've got to get their will done before they go away. That's the busy time for me. And we're all confronted with the idea where there just isn't enough time to do it, or nobody knows where the original is, and that's one of those things that pops into people's minds.
So, given that is a problem and something that if all of us don't think about before we go away, we probably should. What are some of your suggestions to either solve that problem, or solve the problem that in terms of if you can't find the will, what do you do quickly?
Right. Well, for clients who are going away, and where we just literally they come in the day before and they say, I'm leaving tomorrow. If we don't have time to do up a formal will, then I dictate to them the wording for a holograph will, and at least get them to appoint an executor, give their property away in the easiest way we can think of, and give them a power to sell. Give the executor power to sell and sign it, and put it all in their handwriting, and hopefully that gets them over the bump. I've never had a case where we've had to use that holograph will, but that's sort of what we do. So the ones I hit on is, this is my last will. I appoint X to be my executor, and I give all my property to my spouse, and if my spouse is not alive, to my kids, among my issue and equal shares per stirpes. And basically that's the best you can do under the circumstances, and give them a power to sell. So that's what I would do with a client if they didn't have a will at all.
All right, so now you told me off air about an interesting technique that you have when you're at the airport and your last minute panic.
This is a true story. So I'm at the airport, I can't remember where I'm going, but I'm flying with my wife, and I know I've done a will, and I know it's on my hard drive, but I don't know, is it at home, is it at the office, where is the original? So I go back and I start to think, well, what am I going to do from here, from the airport? So what I do is I send myself an email, and I say that if I were to die, this is an email to myself, if I die, the will that I have signed is the last will on my hard drive, in my folder, and I have signed that, and if the original cannot be found, I did not destroy it with the intention of revoking it. So that evidence, I think, would be enough, that email, if anything happened to me, would be enough to prove a copy of the will.
Right.
If the original couldn't be found. And so I can't say that I personally tested that because thankfully I didn't have to. But that was what happened to me when I panicked and thought of A, the embarrassment after my death if anything happened, and B, what would happen to my family. But and so that's what I decided I was going to do. I sent an email to myself saying, by the way, if you can't find it, I didn't destroy it. And that gets you over the presumption of a lost will.
All right. So you've opened us up to a neat planning tool at that moment in time, but also to the whole question of what do we do about lost wills? And I think what I'd like to do in our next podcast is talk a little bit about what it means to have a lost will and how it is affected. But one of the things so let's park that issue,
okay,
because
sure.
that's a bit that's worth a whole podcast,
yeah.
quite frankly. We're going to pick your brain on that one. All right. So is it customary for a lot of your clients though to leave the will with you, or do you most of your clients take the will? In terms of this whole question of how do we have custody of the will and where is your will,
right.
To avoid your panic in the airport.
Right. As you can tell, I don't hold that many original wills. I'm not even sure I hold my own. But I've made a conscious decision to not hold my clients' wills. Yeah. And not, for one thing, because of this, really the main thing is the idea of storing those wills forever and having the obligation, if anything happens to them, of liability. So my practice is to give the originals back to the client. I keep a copy, of course, but that way I'm not responsible for keeping track of it. Now, that means probably I lose some of the administrations, right? Because if I had the original will, they'd have to come back to me, etc. But I'm willing to offset that with the lack of liability and responsibility for storing all these wills.
Well, and I guess it also makes some sense from the client standpoint too, because they want to have the custody of the document. It's their document. It's important to them. And so although most of us want to remember, I guess, put it in our own safety deposit box or put it somewhere safe. Right. It's also not only you're offloading the responsibility to them, but they're taking on that responsibility because that's what matters to them. And
the other thing is, if they want to change the will, I mean, I often see people who come to me and they want to change the will. They went to another lawyer, and they feel really awkward about getting that will from the other lawyer. Should I tell them? I'm embarrassed that I'm not going back to them. They're a family friend, but and so that gets rid of that. That sort of
politics.
The politics of that, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's a good idea too.
Yeah.
So, do you have any other thoughts in terms of how we should avoid the panic of where's my will? We've got the idea of your email to yourself, which was a neat one, and we're going to explore a little bit on that one. We've talked about obviously the option. Some lawyers like to keep the wills for the clients, so that takes the pressure off the client, but it puts the pressure on the lawyer in terms of custody and exposure to maintaining that document forever, so to speak. Are there any other thoughts that you have in respect of avoiding this where's my will panic?
Yeah, well, what I'm planning on doing is opening up a little booth at the airport for wills, the emergency will booth, and you just come in and we'll sign it up and boom, we've done it.
Perfect.
Isn't that good?
That's very good.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Jordan. It's a pleasure to have you here
I'll
today.
You for 50 points on that.
You know what? I just think we put the idea on the internet, and now it's over. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks,
and we'll carry on with your busy practice.
Thanks.
You have been listening to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning by Ian Hull and Susanna Popvic-Montag. The podcast you have been listening to has been provided as an information service. It is a summary of current issues in estates and estate planning. It is not legal advice, and you are reminded to always speak with a legal professional regarding your specific circumstance. To listen to other Hull and Hull podcasts or leave any questions or comments, please visit our website at hullestatemediation.com.